In 1957, during the Cold War, Sergei Korolev started designing the first intercontinental ballistic missile, the R-7. The Soviet Union wanted advanced artillery in order to prove their dominance against the U.S., causing an arms race. The creation of the R-7 broke the frontier for cross-continental artillery, allowing more efficient designs to be used. This is the ISS, the International Space Station. This is the most advanced space station there is. But let's backtrack.
In ancient China, there was a Taoist alchemist who mixed ingredients together, then made potassium nitrate, most commonly known as saltpeter. When saltpeter was mixed with a few more ingredients, it would make black powder, or gunpowder, an explosive powder. When put into a small space, this powder can explode with high amounts of pressure. It was used to make fireworks. This fuel formula helped lead to the V-2, which was the first ballistic missile and inspiration for the R-7. The V-2 was made by German scientists for Germany to use in World War II. It was as close as anyone got to making an ICBM. In early rockets, gunpowder was used. It was a one-time use though. Equally difficult to use was liquid fuel. It needed an oxidizer, like liquid oxygen. It would be hard to have fuel ready quickly, since liquid oxygen boils at room temperature, which then led to the replacement of liquid fuel with solid fuel, which was easy to handle and can be ready in a short amount of time. Exhaust from the solid fuel is created by the lit fuel forced out of a small chamber into the nozzle of the booster, which in turn defies the force of gravity, propelling the ICBM.
Konstantin Tsiolkovsky was born on September 17, 1857. Konstantin was destined to be a Russian rocket scientist who as a child contracted scarlet fever and went deaf. He could never formally enroll in a school, so he taught himself math and physics. Soon he became a math teacher at Guaga. He realized he would be a more successful scientist if he did more theoretical work creating formulas for the trajectory, velocity, and mass rockets would need for partial orbit. These formulas paved the way for missiles, and most are still used today. Another person instrumental to the development of ICBMs was Robert Goddard, who was a mathematician. He worked to make rockets and rocket fuel. He was the first one to make a liquid-fueled rocket in 1926. As a child, Robert Goddard loved doing experiments such as trying to make diamonds. Since his health kept him from school, he read books from the library. When he grew up, he helped make large-scale missiles for the Navy. He began to make rockets that were flight-tested at Auburn Farms. He had plans for high-altitude rockets, but was too poor to buy the resources needed. He wrote Charles G. Abbott, the Assistant Secretary at the Smithsonian. Abbott was able to acquire a $2,500 grant for Robert through private fundings. This grant allowed him to develop rockets and test them. Abbott was satisfied with the testing, so he asked Robert how much more money he wanted. Robert asked for a grant for $6,500. With this money, he claimed could get a rocket into Earth's orbit within a year of time.
An ICBM is an intercontinental ballistic missile. A ballistic missile is designed for hitting targets across continents. Ballistic means gravity is propelling the explosive part of the missile. The R-7 was the first ever ICBM. The R-7 was created by Sergei Korolev. He was a captured German scientist forced into a labor camp by the Soviet Union and put to work to design an intercontinental ballistic missile. When Sergei thought he had finished, he had tried a test flight on May 15, 1957. However, the rocket crashed 250 miles away. Then, on August 21, 1957, the R-7, with improvements, flew at least 3,700 miles and became the first ICBM. The R-7 ran on liquid fuel and 20 engines. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union designed a hydrogen warhead to be placed on the tip of the R-7. The rocket would carry the warhead into the atmosphere where the warhead would be dropped and propelled by gravity onto the desired location. Warheads would carry thermonuclear, biological, or chemical material and cause disastrous effects. The creation of the R-7 broke frontiers for military programs around the world. It opened many doors for new and improved inventions.
After the creation of the R-7, many new uses for the R-7 missile became apparent. The baseline of the R-7 is a missile which is very powerful and able to bring heavy objects into space such as Sputnik 1. Sputnik 1 was the first ever man-made satellite launched into space. Sputnik was launched by the Soviet Union on October 4, 1957. However, Sputnik burned up in the atmosphere 1 week later. The launch of Sputnik made the Soviets wonder what else they could send into space. 4 years later, they sent Yuri Gagarin. Yuri Gagarin was the first person in space. He orbited Earth for 108 minutes. He orbited Earth once before re-entering Earth's atmosphere. Both the US and the Soviet Union were worried about the possibilities their opponents had, so both sides decided to sign a treaty that would strengthen world peace and security. The Strategic Arms Limitation Talks were a series of negotiations and conferences between the Soviet Union and the US to find an agreeable limit to the number of missiles and nuclear arms a nation could hold. These talks eventually led to the signing of the SALT I Treaty on May 26, 1972, by US President Richard Nixon and the Soviet Secretary Leonid Brezhnev. SALT I limited ballistic missiles and missile deployment sites. Even though the SALT Treaty stopped most of the tension between the two sides, accidents still happen. For example, in 1980, a Titan II missile exploded in Damascus, Arkansas. This was due to a pressure buildup causing the rocket to explode and catapult the warhead a couple miles away. Thankfully, the warhead did not explode. The pressure buildup happened because an airman maintaining the Titan II missile dropped a wrench socket. It fell 40 feet before it hit the missile, causing a fuel leak.
The space race led to many technological advancements, such as those necessary for the Apollo missions. This space technology would be used to make the International Space Station, or ISS, where 17 countries joined together. The ISS was the biggest scientific partnership reported at the time. The International Space Station is a base that has been utilized since 1998 for space research. Historically, the Soviet Union was the first one to make a space station, but they decommissioned it so it didn't last long. After the US realized they could put cameras on satellites, they were able to spy on other countries. This spy technology was more and more developed and continues to be today. Now, we have high-speed internet and GPS. As for the present, the ICBM is still one of the biggest threats in the world, which is why we have NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. NATO is in place to keep the peace between 30 signing members of the NATO alliance.